Well, I did decide to pick a couple of upsets this last week, and a couple of upsets certainly did happen. Unfortunately, they were not the ones that I picked, as for some reason I thought that both the Falcons and Chargers could win, but neither one did. Meanwhile, of all teams, it turned out to be the DC football team that put an end to Pittsburgh's unbeaten run. And there was also another NFC East team that won, but I can't for the life of me remember which one that was. The Cardinals did lose to the Rams in the matchup of two teams that, well, it pretty much just came down to which team decided to show up for that game. Meanwhile, the Seahawks offense looked like it was still being run by Darrell Bevell, while his offense put up a whole lot of points against the Bears. Meanwhile, the now 9-3 Browns look like they could certainly be for real. So, it's pretty much just all par for the course in this weird 2020 season. In the end, I still did get out with an 8-7 record, so I didn't quite manage to get that first losing record of the season that I've managed to avoid so far. That said, I will definitely be hoping to do better in Week 14. Quick, if you do find yourself enjoying this video for any particular reason and you like to enjoy things, then the subscribe button is down there. As we start off Week 14, we have the Patriots at the Rams, as the Patriots play in this building for the second time in just a few days. Now, I do have to admit this game already happened, but going in, I had the Rams winning this game 27-20. Mostly because I just didn't trust the Patriots offense to be able to do enough against this Rams defense to get the win. As it turned out, the Patriots offense did more than enough to prove that they definitely should not be trusted, as they gave more points to the Rams than they managed to score. And as we get into Sunday's games, we'll start with the Houston Texans playing the Chicago Bears. Now, just a few weeks ago, the Bears were sitting at 5-1, while the Texans were at 1-5, and then eventually 1-6. But now as it stands, with the Bears having lost 6 games in a row and the Texans winning 3 of their last 5, they're just 1 win away from evening the record with the Bears, which doesn't really mean anything for the standings, as neither one of these teams are going to make the playoffs, but it really does just show how these two teams have gone in separate directions over the last few weeks. And it's also why with this Bears defense that just a couple weeks ago looked like one of the best defenses in the NFL, but now seems like they've gotten worn out on top of an offense that still just can't get anything going, I'm going to end up picking the Texans to win this game 23-17. Up next is this week's episode of Somebody Has to Win This Game of the Week. And with it being the Cowboys and the Bengals, it does seem like somewhat of low-hanging fruit, but it's pretty obvious that this is the worst matchup of the week. And if Joe Burrow was still around, I'd have no problem picking the still awful Bengals to beat the Cowboys. But without Burrow, I just don't really see any way that this team is going to beat anybody outside of the Jets, who they don't play. Meanwhile, it does have to be said that if the Cowboys could kick a field goal, they might have actually put up a pretty decent fight against the Ravens. So they can't necessarily be counted out of every single game they play, so they should be able to beat the Bengals. We'll call it 24-23. With the Chiefs going to play the Dolphins, it does have to be said that over the last couple of weeks, the Dolphins haven't really looked like the same team that they did during the start of the season, or even in the first couple of weeks with Tua. In spite of all that though, at least in the standings anyway, they have at least been able to tread water. But either way, they are still 8-4 and very much in the mix for one of those wildcard spots in the AFC. That being said, they would have to get a lot of things figured out and do it really quickly to be able to stay competitive with this surging Kansas City Chiefs team. So I am going to pick the Chiefs to win this game 30-20. With the Cardinals playing the Giants, well, I do have to say that I think a lot of it had to do with the Seahawks playing an overly conservative offense and kind of just hoping something broke open eventually that really gave us some flashbacks to the Cable Bevel days. That Giants defense certainly did play very well. Meanwhile, with the Cardinals, while it doesn't necessarily seem like the wheels have come completely off at this point anyway, it certainly has been a concerning few weeks for this team. And if they want to stay in the wildcard hunt in the NFC, they're going to have to start winning some games here down the home stretch. And so I do have to say that if you had asked me last week, I would have picked the Cardinals to win this game without a second thought. But now it certainly does not seem like anything close to a guarantee. But I still do think the Cardinals will pull out this win, but it could certainly stay a tight game. I have them winning 20-17. Minnesota going to play Tampa Bay, and two teams that you really just don't know what the heck you're going to get going into each week. Granted, I still do think that Tampa Bay has the stronger of the two defenses, even if it's just by a little bit, and on top of that, at least when it's on, I do think that Tampa Bay's offense has a higher ceiling. So while I wouldn't necessarily say this is Tampa Bay's game to lose, if they play up to their potential, they should be able to win it. But that is a pretty big if at this point. I'm still going to have them winning 31-23. With Denver going to play Carolina, while technically neither one of these teams is mathematically eliminated, I just don't really see either one of them making the playoffs. And while it certainly has not been a cakewalk for the Panthers so far this season, for Denver, it really just has seemed like one thing after another. So I am going to pick the Panthers to win this game 23-17. With Tennessee going to Jacksonville, much like with the Raiders last week, this is the Titans' chance to wash the taste of last week out of their mouths against a team that really should not give them too much trouble. But as the Raiders came just a few seconds away from finding out, nothing is a gimme in the NFL, especially in 2020. But I still am definitely going to be picking the Titans to win this game 27-13. And speaking of the Raiders, after having to wait till the very last few seconds of the game to beat the Jets of all teams, they get to face the best defense in the NFL and the Indianapolis Colts. So ultimately what I think this game will end up coming down to, and I do think that it could be a pretty good game, is the fact that I trust the Colts defense to be able to hold the Raiders to 20 or fewer points. Meanwhile, after having given up 28 points to the Jets, I just can't quite say the same for the Raiders defense. So even if the Colts offense does get in its way from time to time a little bit, they should still win this game 23-20. Now I do have to say that for a number of reasons, I was kind of hoping the Jets could pull out that win against the Raiders. For one, although it is very amusing to watch a team struggle as much as the Jets do, no fanbase deserves to watch their team go 0-16, except maybe the Patriots. Plus, I did grow up in a time where the Raiders were one of the Seahawks' biggest rivals, and well, I haven't quite gotten over my dislike for them yet. But probably the biggest reason that I was hoping the Jets would win that game is that if a team has gotten this far into the season without a win, you do not want to be a fan of the team that finally does give them that first win. And now as Seattle play this Jets team that is coming off of nearly beating a pretty decent Raiders team, the Seahawks did lose to a Colt McCoy-led Giants team. So I'm definitely not feeling as confident as I probably should be able to. Fortunately for the Seahawks though, although it does seem like they may have shifted some of their troubles to the offense, this defense does seem to have finally gotten some things figured out and has been performing pretty well. And on top of that, their best player, or at least one of the two best players on that defensive side of the ball, is going to be particularly motivated against this Jets team to prove that, well, he's having fun in Seattle. Although I am now annoyingly nervous about what should be the easiest game on the Seahawks schedule, I still do think that they win this game 24-13. With Green Bay going to Detroit, while it does seem like Russell Wilson may have thrown in the towel in trying to win the MVP this year, Aaron Rodgers is certainly making his case for winning another one. So even though the Lions are now on a tour of celebration for the rest of the season of getting rid of Matt Patricia, I just don't think that that momentum is going to be enough to win them this game against the Packers. I have Green Bay winning this one 34-21. With New Orleans going to play Philadelphia, it still seems like this Saints offense without Drew Brees just can't be trusted. That being said, even with Jalen Hurts getting his first start, I don't think there's much way you can trust this Eagles offense anymore. Plus, the Saints defense is definitely showing up to pick up the reins for the offense. So even if in the end this Saints offense can't make it look like a blowout on the scoreboard, I do think that they win this one 20-10, and it's never particularly close. Now, I'm not really sure if this is just a regional thing, but you know how when you get to a four-way stop, for example, the same time as somebody else, and you get in this kind of standoff of you go, nope, you go, nope, you go. Well, that's pretty much how I see Falcons versus Chargers. Because I do think that at least through the first three quarters anyway, the Falcons are probably the better team here. But when it comes to the fourth quarter, these are the two franchises that are easily the best in the NFL at losing games against all odds. So really, there's only one way I can think of to decide who's going to win this game. Falcons. 31-27. With DC going to face San Francisco's JV team, this DC defense certainly cannot be ignored, especially when they're facing Nick Mullins. Plus, I really still like Alex Smith's story a lot this season, and he did just beat an 11-0 team. So I'm going to pick the football team to win this game 21-13. And speaking of that Pittsburgh Steelers team, well, coming off of losing their first game of the year to a 3-7 football team, they get to face the surging Buffalo Bills. And while I don't think that the Bills are going to be able to catch them, or the Chiefs for that matter, to get the 1 seed, I do think that after having flirted with their first loss for a number of weeks now, and then finally getting it, I do think that they could make it 2 in a row as the Bills have started to come back into form. Either way though, with this game featuring a Ben Roethlisberger who is very clearly past his prime, although he still did make those questionable decisions that led to interceptions during his prime, against a guy like Josh Allen who very much looks in a lot of ways like a young Ben Roethlisberger, this could be a fun game to watch. Still though, I'm going to pick the Bills to win this game 27-21. And Seahawks aside, I do genuinely hope that this is the Bills' year. But if it turns out not to be the Bills' year in the AFC, then the other team in that conference that us fans of underdogs would like to see win is the Cleveland Browns, in a game that for both teams is very important in the AFC wildcard race. And for the Browns, if the Bills can beat the Steelers, even potentially important for them to try and win the division. Either way though, with Lamar Jackson looking like 2019 Lamar Jackson last week, and the Browns offense seemingly scoring all the points that they had been saving up over the last month, this is exactly the type of Monday night game that fans like to see when it comes to the month of December. Now, with both teams, and especially both offenses, there will be a lot of questions of whether or not last week's performances were a sign of things to come, or just a window into what could have been. One thing is for certain though, when it comes to meaningful games in December between AFC North teams, things can get pretty exciting, especially in primetime. And even though a lot of the hype for this game will be based around Baker versus Lamar and these two offenses, and ultimately the game probably will be decided by which one can live up more to its potential, I do think that it's these two defenses that could certainly end up stealing the show, and in particular this Browns defense that has kept this Browns team on track in spite of how much the offense struggled in the month of November. Now of course when he's on, Lamar Jackson is unlike any other quarterback in the NFL and certainly poses some unique threats. But the Browns have seen that a few times now and should be able to, at least as much as they can, game plan for it. I do think that this Browns defense will win them this game, and it'll be a 23-20 victory. And that will bring me to the end of my Week 14 pick. So as always, if you have made it to this point in the video, thank you very much for watching. If you liked or enjoyed this video, there are buttons for those kind of things down there below. Otherwise, I would love to hear in the comments section what your thoughts on Week 14 are, or just yell at me for getting things wrong. Otherwise, stay safe out there and be good to each other. Peace.